Softball.
Yeah. So,
Newcastle. You guys usually don't, so I'm gonna call Damariscotta for a workshop meeting with the Damariscotta Newcastle Joint Public Works Department or committee. Sorry, I should say that. I just try to talk when I can.
what's going on with your voice?
It comes and goes. It comes and goes. So I have quorum at Dan Humber's out of town. Andrew's been in and out, so she may have been up there. So there's three of us here. It's all over the quorum. So yeah, I don't know. You guys usually call your boards.
You call the meeting?
Sure, for the Newcastle portion.
Newcastle calling, select board, joint select board, meeting at 6:01.
Official.
I think Kevin and I kind of walk through the slides and what we're gonna put together, and we just want to update folks.
Well, I'm gonna just suggest, the members of the working group are on this side of the table, so you know who has been suffering through all of our meetings with us, but.
You know who to blame. It's these guys.
Nice, I'll just think this.
Yeah.
And it's been good. We've had a lot of the folks that are in the room tonight and then more, but a lot of them have been attending the workshops for the last few, 3 or 4 probably. So it's good to see everyone here tonight. Just a quick outline or overview of what we want to go over tonight, just primarily give an update on where the committee's come this far. Go over quick check-in and refresh on kind of the 2 towns profiles and where our current overview of costs are. Kevin will share with you where we've come with the interlocal agreement draft. I'll share a bit about the budget and projections that we have in here. And then hopefully good discussions and some of the next steps. But I are looking for guidance.
Andrew, could you speak up a little bit so the public can hear you?
I will attempt to speak louder. Is that better? Perfect. So as far as the purpose of the group back in May, Kevin, there are links within the PowerPoint which will be available to the public on our website after the meeting. So if folks want to do a deeper dive into some of this, there's some hyperlinks within that that'll take you to some of the documents that we've been working off of. Back in May, almost a year ago, the work group was tasked to look primarily at five things: reviewing each town's public works annual scope of work, identifying optimal work plan for the departments, forecasting various cost models to deliver that work plan, exploring if the joint public works department is a viable option, and determine the next steps to inform what was at the time going to be this budget cycle planning that we're under right now. So slightly behind on that 5th one, but still hard at work. And a number of committee meetings have been had, not quite monthly, but pretty steady through that. The links to those YouTube videos, or what is those?
I think that takes you to the agendas.
So for the agendas and any accompanying material that was with those, some of those might have hyperlinks to this information. You can just click on those once you open up that document there. What we found initially, or what we found so far, is that initial costs to get started would be greater than current contracts. But the benefits, as we see it, would be more in that more maintenance work, preventative work can get done than what we are currently seeing. And that we feel like it'd be a better product throughout the whole year for both communities by having that staff that would be looking to build up, if approved, would be able to accomplish. As mentioned, slightly behind, but the select boards continue to hopefully, through this conversation today, look through the details here, further discussion, and put us on the right track for whatever those next steps might be. Just continuing sharing the last 3 meetings we were able to have in December, January, and another one earlier, just a couple weeks ago, in which the goal was to set this one. Again, the hyperlinks, once it's up there, you can all dive into those. Without getting too far into the weeds, and we'll get into it, after with the data we have here in the draft, but very quickly, what, we've found so far, is kind of primary conclusions. There are some potential long-term savings, there's some graphs there to show what that might look like. Another pro of proceeding with this effort would be to try and have a better control of those costs over time. And as you contract, I mean, you're at the mercy of however many people will submit bids, as to how competitive those prices are going to be. And we have a chart to kind of show what we've seen over the last 20 years. That's helpful to see where we've been. See more output for work products at our pace, on our timeline, rather than for Damariscotta, we got to accrue it to, and over Newcastle, you don't know, contract everything. So just the availability by having that staff in house means if we need it done, the town managers can call the supervisor can ask the staff, we just need it, and you'll be able to get done. And then as a pro for the area, being able to create reliable, hopefully good jobs for those from the area. Cons, things that it's not a secret, the first 2 years costs, as you'll see, are higher than what we're currently paying. And that's a challenge. Some of those numbers you'll see them if you haven't yet. It's high in the upfront those first few years. But the projections also, again, on the pros, you'll see that there's some potential savings on the back end. The assumed risk is a kind of quote with hiring and managing the staff. And that comes with whether you're managing their availability through sick or other personal issues or injuries on the job or otherwise. And so just generally, we have to realize that creating a department with upwards of potentially 12 people at that premium level of service is something that you own. The contractor's not bearing that contingency in the price that they've given you. So it's a reality, and we manage staff now, but it's just something to realize and be mindful of. The direct responsibility of performance, sometimes when you have a contract, you can stick to the call the contractor out on it, but if folks have concerns or issues with it, it's what we contracted for and it's in there versus it's ours, why can't you just have them go do it? So it's very likely, I know in both towns' cases, the contractor ends up fielding a lot of those complaints and calls. As much as I know I and probably Kevin will suggest they come to the town office so we're aware of those issues. A lot of times they're going directly and we might not be aware. So again, realizing that all of that will fall in the department. And I think, one of the other challenges, and I think remember hearing it from before when this was attempted, is just managing the needs and expectations of the two towns through one shared department. I think being open to a work plan rather than time must be spent equally every year or every week or every month between each town, proportionate to their cost share. But looking at the two towns, something Paul had mentioned early on in the committee, was looking at the two towns as if there wasn't a line in the middle and just managing the assets, the capital, the roads, as they need to be improved. And that through this cost sharing model that presumably the committee or as Kevin will explain, the oversight board or
Joint oversight board.
That'll take that into consideration too, but I do imagine that that'll be something that we will probably be hearing a lot about. That managed expectation of time spent, resources spent there.
Before you go any further, and you mentioned Paul. Paul's a consultant we work with. He's involved with the Maine Local Roads Service and does a lot of, he's the road ranger for the state and has worked in public works throughout Massachusetts and Maine. So.
As I mentioned, we'll talk a bit about the interlocal agreement that's been worked on and drafted, still a draft, but at this point, the committee felt comfortable putting that forward for discussion. The line item budget, we built that out based on the state's model part of account for municipalities. So there's a fair amount of depth and information in there, and then attempted to project that out over 40 years. The timeline has been created to help guide this. And we started to draft the list of policies. We have not dove into actually drafting policies. It's a bit early to commit to doing that.
Just a couple of them, and I realized until I know that we actually want to do this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. And I think that would fall as a role of responsibility of the joint oversight board.
At the end of this, needing insight, guidance from the two boards in terms of the direction and the next steps to be taken. And this isn't meant to be a determining end all, but I mean, hopefully there's some good conversation about what you've seen, the questions you have. To be able to point out, but still give us the guidance that Kevin and I need to be able to understand at what speed and in what direction are we taking this next. We threw this in here to revisit. It was mostly, this has been in a previous presentation, but to be able to package it all up into one presentation, we thought it was nice to kind of summarize the two towns. We've added the sidewalk miles. I think that's the only real change from before, but between the two towns, we've got 29, almost 30 miles to maintain that would be deemed as summer maintenance, or sorry, 39 for summer maintenance, 64 miles to plow for winter maintenance. That's our responsibility. All those state aid roads are our responsibility in the wintertime, as you know. The state still owns and would maintain 7 miles in total, Route 1 and then 1B through both towns. Right now, the state, I believe, plows Route 1, and then they contract to have 1B or Main Street plowed. So presume there's a possibility in the future that, you know, that the two towns created something like this, that, you know, Main Street might be something that is contracted through the town, but otherwise, together the two towns have just over 4 miles of sidewalk, and I know in Damariscotta we're talking about adding more. We got plans for up on Main Street. We're going through planning effort. I know in Newcastle there's been talks about at least redoing some and maybe extending some. And so that's why I thought it was important on there in case we get into wanting to use that as part of the cost share consideration. Staffing, Damariscotta having 2 full-time equivalents, as we mentioned, and Newcastle not having any. The road commissioner structure is slightly different. We both have them, but currently a little bit different. And then Damariscotta's got some equipment. 1 truck and a couple trailers and a couple smaller mobile pieces of equipment. Facility wise, we've got a small residential 2-bay garage, sand shed, another Quonset hut for the salt storage. You guys have a small utility shed and a Quonset for the salt storage. And an open pile.
Does your garage have a bathroom yet?
Garage finally has a bathroom.
All right.
How long's it been up there now?
Oh,
20 years.
long time.
Finally has that at least.
That's embarrassing. Long before that.
Kind of an overview of where we are with current costs. We do have this budgeted year and then last year's numbers in here to share. Over the last 2 fiscal years, the two towns have budgeted 1.6 million for operating expenses. And then 1.7 million if you include the additional expenses. Well, sorry, 1.6 million for just the winter maintenance, right?
Yeah.
For over the last 2 years. And then an additional 1.7 for all other operating costs. But you can see here for Newcastle, $722,000 last year, $749,000 this year for winter contract, and Damariscotta the 416 and 470 at this year. We did add, just so you can see that there's, you know, beyond the operating expenses, we do also proactively fund some reserve efforts, more so in Damariscotta. On the facility and equipment side, we both invest some in our roads. Newcastle this year at $1.1 million, mostly in your road improvements.
The other part of that is just debt. I didn't include our facilities fund. Number.
And for us, Damariscotta, we got the 576 that was in there this year for all capital costs, which is split between some debt from one bond we have, and then the other proactive funds going into the other road sidewalk and equipment lines. So to share and show a little bit over the last 20 years of contract history we have, and kind of where it's gone. For both towns here, Newcastle in red and Damariscotta in blue, the increases for the last 10 years in particular have been the steepest. And what was interesting, you'll see on the next slide, there's a couple of towns we're trying to compare ourselves to, but you know, we kind of got looking at the last 20 years, it was pretty eye-opening to see that, go back.
Oh, sorry.
we've gone up over 200% in each town in the last 20 years for Newcastle. And then Damariscotta was like 487% in the last 20 years. 484. So it was interesting in looking at like, what's that average annual? It doesn't come on an average equally annual distribution. You know, I think that with the contract prices, a lot of times what we would see is that first year, maybe the second year was small or no increase. And then when it came up for renewal, we saw a bigger jump. We've had contractors change over that time frame too. And so that also plays a factor in that. The most important thing for this is just showing what it is, and it kind of led to another question of, are other towns seeing these kind of changes? And started to Paul look at some of the other towns around us, just since the last meeting, really, just to compare. So it was really kind of eye-opening to see those jumps. And so what we were seeing in some of the other towns, and we're continuing to gather more from others. In the table there on the left, you can kind of see what the dollar values were in 06 and 2016 and 26. The chart just shows the percent change in that first 10-year period, and then in red, that second 10-year period. So you see Damariscotta in each 10-year period has seen 140% roughly in each 10-year period. Newcastle, a much lower increase in the first 10 years that we were mapping, 40-something%. And then that last 10 years, the increase percentage-wise for Newcastle was closer to the 140, almost 150%. The other three towns that we have on here was two immediate neighbors, Wiscasset and Waldoboro. They have downtown areas. They've got a lot more, in both cases, more miles of road than we do. But they also both do it in-house. And so we were kind of curious, is there a difference between towns that contract it in whole or part, in part or in whole, versus that, you know, if there's an idea that maybe can you control your cost better if it's in-house? And so it's not definitive, but it's starting to look at, oh, there's maybe something here in thinking that their numbers aren't seeing the spikes or the increases we have. So again, trying to pull more of that in just to kind of verify some of that with our neighbors. I was able to pull Durham in. What was interesting about them, in 2006, they did contract everything out. And in 2016, actually it was 2014, they attempted to work with one of their neighboring towns. It didn't end up for them work out. Durham kept a department, built up a department. So for them, the first 10 years is where they had gone with contract work. And then that last 10 years, the percent increase was less than 50%. I thought that was an interesting comparison within that same time frame that they actually transitioned to have their own department. The cost there, it would only make more sense if you actually had some parameters around miles of road, staff, and all of that. But on its surface, looking at percent increases, the question was more about, can we control that cost better if it was in-house? Others seeing those changes that we're seeing, and the others around us that we've started to gather aren't seeing the contract cost changes that we are, for the percent increases.
Before I shift to interlocal agreement, are there questions from board? This point.
I was going to ask about the size of Durham, but you just said that you didn't have any comparative.
Road miles, they don't have, I think they've got a real main street. Road miles wise, I think they're about 60, did have it, about 60 miles. So it's not far off from what our road miles are, but I do not think they've got that kind of downtown center like we have.
So will pass through town though. There's a lot of commuters that drive through Durham, so I think their immediacy of snowplow is, you know, similar to Newcastle.
So I was gonna ask a couple of questions. When you started out, what's the break even between current costs and expected operating costs when they're about to equal? And then at what time is it 10 years that the total cumulative expenses on both, you know, coincide?
Getting a little ahead of us.
Okay. Is it in here?
I do have it in
Okay.
there, yes. So I wanted to kind of lead us into just kind of where we've been, kind of a snapshot of what we're seeing from these historical costs. The next was Kevin was going to go through the interlocal agreement, and then I'll talk after that about the budgeting piece that we're seeing.
Before you do that, I've got a question about the, going back to the slide, with the current costs.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I think, Kevin, you said that, you included debt service. Is it debt service or?
Debt service and debt service specifically for the Academy Hill Road.
Okay,
So
so
Academy Hill Road cost.
Yeah, is there any debt service on the Damariscotta side or?
Yeah, we got one road bond that we took out in 22, I think. No, it's about $200,000 right now for us, 197.
Outstanding or debt service?
Annual payment, that's on the books till 2032, I believe.
Okay. Um, okay, is that included in your,
Yes.
in that as well?
Yeah, our road contribution, this fiscal year is 150,000. Sidewalks at I think 70,000. Debt, another 200,000, so that 500 is, then the rest of it is made up by, vehicle and equipment reserves that we have, facility reserve. Some of that I thought was relevant only because when we get into the budget projections, previously we had shared really just the operating costs, but when we get into those projections, you'll see some of those capital costs are built into those numbers. So I thought it was relevant to kind of share with you kind of the higher number that we're currently contributing to the buildings, the road, and equipment now.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily an apples to apples comparison, because when you just talk about what we spend for operating on a basis is less than what we actually allocate for roads and infrastructure, so.
Right. I'm just wondering, I guess I'm trying to me, it all seems like apples and oranges though, but debt service into this.
Well, it is just here, it's just here to
Yeah,
understand.
it's just kind of a little profile. Right now.
And what we as two communities spend on our roads, roads, public works, roads and infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary to understand it. I just question, I guess, why it was. That's fine.
Show you a little further.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is on the historical costs, with this wire grabs. I mean, Newcastle, the blue-red line disparity there is crazy. I think it's just worth the mention to say in 2000, around 2016, 17, we engaged a different philosophy on a roads program. And we got a lot more aggressive, which just shows in that graph of how we approach roads on a three-year time cycle. So that was by choice that we started spending more on roads about 10 years ago. So
The numbers don't include the capital side of it.
On
These
this,
numbers only show the operating side.
that's only the.
on this graph, yes.
So it does, because we ended up putting more money behind time and material for contractors to do that work. The initial first year of, ditching and tree work and road prep, culvert replacement. So that's all in the first year of a 3-year cycle. The years 2 and 3 of that cycle are tied into our capital reserve. So that first year cycle, the upfront cost to get that started and to maintain that, that's what that increases. Over 10 years.
Okay, so
That's the operating side of it. It's essentially like, that's what your public works department annual budget would be.
right. So that is baked into that disparity there, that gap.
Yeah, we try to look at it like if you're doing the ditching and the tree work, that's typically routine maintenance. Sometimes our town too, we're behind on that stuff, and it becomes a capital project. But if you're staying on top of it, again, all that tree work and ditch work is really in front of your projects are really kind of should be more of a routine thing.
Yeah.
Culvert replacements, because they fail, that's potentially at a bigger scale, that's a capital project. If it's one off, you just do as part of operating typically.
Good.
So Kevin and work to just try and put that so that the two towns were kind of putting that same effort forward there to see.
Okay, any other questions about this first half? I know we have more to do on the budget side, after I just kind of introduce the interlocal agreement concept. So we're exploring this cooperative effort between the two towns. We both provide essential public works services independently and with varying levels of contracts. Damariscotta has 2 staff members who do substantial amount of the work, but the 2 guys cannot plow all the roads or take care of all of the needs of the town. So they do they do have contracts for many of the other public works related services. A shared service, we believe would have, allow for better efficiency and coordination, reduce duplication of equipment and staffing, and shared expertise and improved service quality. So this agreement creates a long-term stable framework for cooperation. And it provides off-ramps if we decide not to do it in the future. Or before we spend a lot of money. Then once we spend a lot of money on a facility, it becomes a little harder to get out of this contract. Supports future investment in the public works facility. So what it does and does not do, what it does, it creates a joint public works department as a quasi-municipal entity. It establishes shared governance, budgeting, and oversight, and it preserves local control through voter approval annual budgets. What it does not do, it does not merge the two towns, it does not remove voter authority over budgets or capital spending, and it does not allow one town to control the other. The joint oversight board is made up of 6 voting members, 3 from each town. Quorum is 4 members, so with representation for both towns. So actions require 4 affirmative votes, and the 2 town managers serve as non-voting ex officio members, as they do on the select boards. Provide professional guidance and joint recommendations. So their responsibilities are to approve policies, snow and ice, safety, road standards, etc. They recommend the annual operating and capital budgets to the select boards. They appoint the public works director. There's details in there about, it's the 2 town managers who make a recommendation to the joint operating oversight board. The details are in there, but and approves the capital plans and the jointly owned equipment. So purchasing equipment, that's a decision of the oversight. There is a public works director who is appointed or removed by the board on joint recommendation of the 2 town managers. This person would manage the daily operations and the staff. This person is accountable to the board for policy, service levels, and budgets. And the managing municipality, I'll get a little further into this, the managing municipality for the personnel and administration. So here's the sort of town voters from each town, elect their select boards, the select board appoint the joint oversight board oversee the director, and the director oversees the staff. And there is a managing municipality, so the town manager there is the employer of record and oversees the HR, the payroll, purchasing, is responsible for labor negotiations and supervises the director. The non-managing municipality is the town manager there is the also a member of the board, and put that on the other side, but they're both members of the board, ex officio board members, but also does the director evaluation, is involved in that process, is involved in recommendation for termination or hiring as well, is involved in the budget and financial review, and participates in negotiations. So both town managers are in. If there is a decision for Public Works Department to create a union, they both be involved in the labor negotiations. Mentioned this already, managing municipality does these. So budgets, the joint oversight board develops a recommended joint budget, working with the director and the town managers. And then final approval rests first with the select boards of each town, and then finally the voters as required by law. So levels of commitment within this agreement, approving the interlocal agreement, potentially June 2026. Talk about that in a little bit. This established the framework for a joint public works department. So basically the litmus test of the community. Do we want to do this? Do we want to have an interlocal agreement? It creates the governance, the budget and oversight, does not authorize land purchase, construction, or debt. Neither town may withdraw before major capital investments subject to notice and reimbursement of planning costs. So step 2 would be future decisions. So these are separate approvals are required ultimately by the voters. Purchase of land, building of a facility, borrowing or long-term financing. Exit and cost protection. So there's early withdrawal. It's basically reimbursement of planning and contractual costs. So let's say we decide, the committee, the two select boards decide we want to move forward with this and take this to the voters. They would vote to, hopefully vote to say, yes, we want to do this in a local agreement. A year from now, we can't find a site costs are too great, we don't want to do this anymore. We're just gonna have to pay back or make sure that there's a cost share of the money spent on due diligence. And then cost, a withdrawal after capital investment. If a town decides they want to get out, it's a responsibility of outstanding debt. Share, they continue to have a share of the unamortized facility and equipment costs funding during notice period. This was something I was adamant about making sure. I know the towns tried to do joint public works before. It was a very easy document to get out of, and then I think really hurt the relationship for some period of time. And then it's designed to protect both towns from financial harm. So there's strong voter protections in this. The agreement only takes effect after voter approval in both towns. Material amendments also require voter approval in both towns. Financial transparency, this is, you know, the cost sharing and reporting is all very clear in the, well, will be set as part of the exhibit. Obviously, the numbers within those change and are looked at annually. And then the finances are part of the annual audit, would be presented to both selectments. So everyone's aware of what's happening within this department. The long-term commitment, this is a 25-year initial term that supports the land acquisition, facility construction, and major capital investment. So the point here is once large capital investment has been expended, it protects the towns from getting out too early, or if a town does want to, there's a financial cost. Protect taxpayers and prevent instability. So I want to touch on the cost share formula and allocation. One thing we looked at was center lane miles and the average of the seasonal center lane miles. So winter maintenance refers to all of the miles in each town that are both town roads and state aid roads. State aid roads include things like 215 in Newcastle, 213, Sheepshead Road, River Road. Those are all state aid roads where we are responsible for plowing, but we do not maintain those roads. So all those calls I get about the frost heaves on River Road, I have to send them on to the state and inform them that they need to put some bump signs. But of course, then if you were to do that, you get bump signs every 5 feet. Anyway, and then summer maintenance, those are the roads that the town owns and is responsible for ditching, clearing out culverts, replacing culverts, and paving or pothole repair. So those are tree trimming as well. So those are our responsibilities. So when you average those two out, Damariscotta has about 36% and Newcastle has about 64% of that. And when we start talking about the numbers, and I'll jump into the line item budget to show you what does that cost show. I'll jump into that in a little bit, but this cost share formula has two components to it. One is a formula for share of operating expenses is based on that. So that's supply services, and then the other portion was a share of population, state valuation, and the center and miles. And it comes to about 50% for personnel and debt. So assuming all the personnel are servicing both towns, I think the wonky part is maybe the extra miles during the winter that you're driving around Newcastle to plow. So those are, I think, part of the conversation at the end of this presentation. And that's where I'll stop. So this cost share concept is currently Exhibit A in the interlocal agreement as presented. And I'll let Andy go back to the budget because he did a lot of the work here. I can jump into the budget proposal right here with the link to show you how that formula affects the numbers.
Yeah, you want, any questions on the interlocal?
Well, on this part,
Interlocal agreement that Kevin just covered?
yeah.
Want to get back into any of that before we jump into the numbers?
I'm failing to see how the formula equates out to the 49.9% split.
That is an average of population, state valuation, and seasonal center lane miles.
But I don't know I don't understand the relationship between the population and the amount of work and mileage that has to be done by each town.
That's a fair concern and something we can talk about as part of the final piece of this. I want to show you what the numbers are when you just look at, when you look at all of the costs associated with public works as a percentage of those two numbers at the bottom. Of course, you can't see it because that's session library. That comes out to 64.09%. So when Newcastle has the share of, as we mentioned, some of the costs to start this are greater. So it's a heavy lift for Newcastle. So that's why we're trying to find a way to soften the blow a little bit. I'll get into I think I should just get into that number. And so. I'm gonna turn off Thomas's suggestion. Nope. Okay, so. There's three levels, three tiers. I'll jump back here. There's three tiers: the standard, the premium, and phase one. And I'll go to those line items, but the current operating, so we talked about the operating plus debt, that was over you look at the two towns, we're spending closer to 3 million, a little over 3 million together. When you just look at operating, we spend $1.8 million. And under the standard formula, for the standard concept, which is 7.5 positions. And our goal is first to prioritize plowing before we take care of the downtowns. The premium is plowing and having crews for the downtowns at the same time. That's 12 positions. So that's the difference between those two. When you look at those costs compared to what we're currently spending, it's a lift of $300,000 to do this. Or it's another lift of almost $700,000 to do the premium version. Essentially, the same as what we're getting for our contracts right now. To do in-house in day one, it'll probably cost about $700,000 more.
You want to explain why?
We will when we get into that, yeah.
So I need to
So
change
you want to go to that?
this thing.
So,
Yeah, but it won't show there. So
It won't.
I'm gonna not stop share. I'm gonna jump to. I'm gonna jump to this document. And so this is that same slide. Now I've just gone into the budget forecast document that we created. Numbers are a little different than what we have there. Are you tweaking?
probably off. Made up.
I mean, not that kind of tweaking, but
Working.
stop by 2,000.
Yeah. So the difference there, I talked yesterday, I put another truck in the premium one.
Put another truck in premium.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. That's the only difference there is they got 313, it's still 270.
Okay,
But the premium is from 692 to 727.
okay. So you put another truck in premium. All right, oh boy.
Is there a slide with the breakdown again of the definition between premium and standard? I know you said there's extra personnel and then.
And I'll go back to that, yeah. Extra personnel and equipment, and both of those slides are there. Next couple of slides show you personnel and
Yeah,
equipment.
the premium, as we talked about it, is kind of what we'll see. We got, each town has a road contract and a downtown contract. They're both kind of assumed to equal priority. Whereas what we consider standard, if you look at most public works departments, you got what you have for staff and you're gonna have to prioritize a lot of times roads over sidewalks. Doesn't mean you're never always working on sidewalks, but you might have one person working on sidewalks just to keep at it. Versus the primary responsibility is keeping people safe on the roads. And then as time allows, either quickly or a day or whatever it is after the storm, then the crew's able to come down and clear. That's not atypical for a lot of towns. As a more standard level of service. Now, some towns do invest and make sure that it's a top priority. Because they might have just a significant amount of downtown traffic. I imagine Augusta, Bangor probably treated a bit different. We didn't look at those towns, but that's how we were kind of seeing the premium and standard is you
So
don't have
you're
much.
forecasting for the whole program, are you looking, basing it on standard or premium?
We've got numbers for all three.
Okay.
You got graphs
I mean,
that come off there.
You're leaning in one direction or the other? You would,
I don't know that the committee's pushed one over the other.
I mean, when we initially met with the committee said, because of the cost lift, we would stick with standard. When we came to you in the fall, well, give us both, give us it all, give us everything. And that's what we were focused on doing.
okay.
I think that's when we added the phased approach potentially.
Yes.
Or was that meeting or right
That was
after?
in December.
Uh,
Yeah, the phase approach.
And so this phased or phase one downtown approach as it's labeled there, it's like, okay, well, I think someone from here had actually raised the comment and it's like, well, maybe they're here. Instead of doing all of it at once, is there a way that we can step into it? And so the assumption is that the downtown contract is not well sought to be bid on, and it's a smaller crew that'd be needed, a smaller set of equipment. Some of it's more specialized. You can rent short term. You don't have to buy as much. And so the idea was that maybe we set up a downtown crew, smaller number of people, again, rented equipment versus purchased equipment. You don't need to invest as much in the facility size. And so it would be for about a 5-year period is what the numbers would show. So for the first 5 years, you're doing this. In year 6, you're then expanding to take over the rest of it.
So what happens to the premium crew that grew when the downtown's cleared? I mean, are those on full-time staff?
Yeah, and the slide deck there, next one talks about proposed staffing levels. So I mean, that's the priority. There's, I think, enough in general to keep them busy, and if they need to, I mean, there's gonna be equipment maintenance, there's enough small things when you're doing a storm that you're gonna have to tend to.
Right.
I mean, the fuel capacity on those, that equipment's not very big, so I think there's plenty to keep them.
Well, and if someone's sick or we're
Right.
down a person, you
You need
have
that
additional
flexibility.
staff to make sure that the roads get cleared
Right.
as your priority.
I think if you looked at both contracts right now for both towns, there are 4 contracts per se. I'm gonna assume that we were counting all the people working in those during a storm, is probably more than 12.
Yeah.
So this is still pretty, somewhat lean to be able to hold both of those sidewalks and roads to a kind of equal level of high standard. But I mean, you're gonna have, I guess, what was it, 60 something miles of plowing to do. That's gonna be a minimum of 6 people out of trucks. And then you're gonna have likely 1 or 2 more doing some of that. The downtown's got a mix of plow routes and sidewalk routes. So you're gonna have 1 or 2 out of plow trucks there, and then that leaves 2 or 3 on the sidewalks themselves, which a lot of it tends to be handwork because of the width of some of them. So I don't really see where there's a lot of extra, and it does. Sometimes we're gonna require us to pull someone from probably the downtown and into a plow truck if needed.
What about parking lots? Where do they fall on this
With the downtown,
for the downtown?
They're part of our downtown contract now.
if you think of the coordinated effort that both contractors do now, I mean, you got 1 or 2 in loaders, you got a couple in sidewalk machines, you got a couple hand shoveling. At any point during the storm downtown, so, I think what we were kind of envisioning was probably a crew of 4 downtown. With a mix of a couple seasonal employees, they're measured as full-time equivalents, and the premium level, we'd have, in theory, 2 part-time seasonal folks helping out down there.
Can I phrase it this way? I guess the question is, in the premium scenario versus standard, in one scenario, are you overstaffed? Adequately staffed, and in the other scenario, implied understaffed?
I think the way that we envision the levels of service to be performed for the towns, these are reasonably staffed.
Got it, so it's complementary.
I think, because again, if you got a storm where 2 people are out for whatever reason,
Yeah,
you're gonna be pulling it, so all of a sudden your premium level of service, the sidewalks aren't gonna be with 4 people working, you're gonna have 2 people working.
Right.
You're still gonna be on it, you're just not gonna have it as clear as quickly, so, and the same thing with the standard, 7.5 full-time equivalents and 60 miles plus 5 miles of sidewalk to do. You're gonna have to, it's gonna be a minute before you get through all the sidewalks, the idea is you still have 1 person down there tending to them. But that'd be a very different change, your plow routes are gonna emphasized your priority roads, you're gonna have to prioritize roads, and the towns are gonna have to know that. You know, all state aid roads would likely be a high priority, and that some of the other ones might fall on a second or third level. So you'd have to prioritize who's gonna be out where, on what routes when, on that standard level. I think the way we referred to it earlier on was kind of your lean, but not, it's a lean public works with that on a standard level.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanna just quickly go back to this document, because I think there's a overlap here of trying to convey some of that information, but also show what that interlocal agreement, and I want to come back to the interlocal agreement and these formulas collectively, but it's important to see that in our cost share for these two departments, and if you just look at the interlocal agreement of a average of the winter and summer mile maintenance, the cost for each town, the difference is an increase in the premium. I'll just look at premium for now. For Damariscotta, so the increase for Damariscotta is $87,000. For Newcastle, it's $640,000. I'm not sure that there's gonna be much support for this. Just thinking, to do something like that kind of heavy lift. So
Why is that? Can you get into the detail of that?
well, we spend nearly $2 million now for roads, to add another $600,000.
No, what's the 639,000? Why is it so much greater than the 87?
Well, the cost share difference is 64% versus 36%, and you just take it simply over the numbers and what they're currently contributing in their operating budget annually.
So the cost increase from our current expenses collectively, so the cost to do this premium is $2.5 million. We currently collectively spend $1.8 million.
Yeah,
So the increase to do that is 700. How do you split that $700 difference?
okay.
And that $700 is split this way with this formula. That's
Yeah.
essentially what that does.
I think adding to that, if you go back up a little bit and you look at the operating costs, knowing that one town has more road miles than the other. I mean, we aren't necessarily investing quite the same in the operating expenses. They're way ahead of us in Newcastle on the proactive, kind of like the road work. I mean, they've got 900 or $1 million to work with annually, where we're talking about $200,000 on.
Yeah. Can you go back to the bottom again?
So if you look at that, there 817,000 this year from Damariscotta with a third of the road miles. You know, and they're at 975, again, heavily investing more in the maintenance for the capital improvement work that we are. So I think when you're starting out, I mean, you can already see that. No, I know.
Yeah,
And just at the operating, and so you can see where if you were to put that same thing there and say, take it at what are you investing on your operating per road mile? In this case, Damariscotta is investing higher per road mile on the operating expenses. And that's what that is trying to catch up. When you go down below, what Kevin's highlighting is if you divide this as it is right now by road miles, and Newcastle was already spending a little bit less per road mile, not saying they're not spending more in total, but per road mile on the operating, they're then making up a bigger.
Yeah, I'm a little slow here, because I'm probably missing it. You guys are way ahead of us. 35% versus 64, and then you get 87 and 639. So I don't know what the.
Compute.
So
the numbers I've highlighted are not highlighted, so the sum of this right here
Yeah,
is
2.5 or 2.
the $2.5 million.
Yeah.
This is how much of the share, the highlighted numbers, are how much of the share of an increase compared to what we're already spending.
Okay.
Each town is already spending, so that's an increase from these numbers.
Current operating costs.
All right.
So that Newcastle spends on the operating side nearly $1 million already. This is asking Newcastle to spend another $600,000 on top of the nearly $1 million we spend now. So that's I think the challenge related to the formula as drafted.
well,
I
again,
think that'd be a tough ask to.
I think it's a tough ask.
well, and to highlight again,
Yeah.
the formula is based on road miles. And so if you go back to what I had said previously, that if you look at current operating expenses made this year, the per road mile Damariscotta contributes is a higher And so you're making up that gap, but this is emphasizing that only because the current cost share as it's in front of you is based on road miles. The other one that Kevin mentioned was taking into consideration do you take into consideration in the cost share, the valuation, the population and anything else? I'll throw in sidewalk miles because I know Damariscotta's planning to add a few more. Through our work, and I know you guys are too, but that might not be growing at the same pace, and you got staff and maintenance needs for that, you know, might be important to factor, because that'll change a lot faster. In either town rather than road miles, you don't discontinue roads very often, I know you guys just considered, you know, just did that, but it's not an often tax.
Something.
Can you go back to that slide? I apologize, I'm with Tom here, I think I see where Tom is and where I think you are. The 49.9 is to level out that number there, is what you were looking at from that previous question I had, correct? When I said, how did you get to the 49.9 from the 35.9? That is a leveling number out of the gate to make it softer on their number. Correct?
Correct.
Layman's terms.
Yes.
Different formula, yeah.
Yeah,
The original.
that's where we were trying to say, trying to make the argument that the debt is more, an even share, like the facility is more of an even share than necessarily the maintenance of the roads. So the equipment might be the part of the 50-50, or part of the 60-40 split. But the building itself and the number of staff we have, I mean, I honestly, like, if we were to try to do. The numbers were 7.5 for a standard. I would need at least 4, if not 5 people myself to run a public works department in Newcastle. And how many would you need if you were doing it by yourself?
I'd say a minimum of 4.
Right, so we're talking, trying to save a half a position, maybe a whole position. Or a position and a half, by joining forces. So when I think about personnel, I also think maybe that's something that's equally shared.
Our municipal budget would go up by 18% this year. Cover that.
Yeah. Yeah, we spend 3.5 million for our municipal budget.
Yeah, that's time.
Well, and so that's where you know, if we want that level of service for premium to focus on our downtowns. There's probably more sidewalk, and that's where to include the sidewalk as part of the formula, so. There's a lot of ways to cut this, I'm hopeful we can eventually come up with a solution that is beneficial to both communities. I understand Newcastle with more roads, that's fine. We understand that too.
We don't have more sidewalks.
We don't yet.
And we're not,
It's close.
we don't have plans to add any.
I mean, we're talking 3/4 mile, 3/4 of a mile of sidewalk more in Damariscotta.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we're talking apples to apples for out of the gate.
Sure, and it's not just it's not just sidewalk.
I'm just,
Yeah, parking lot, we don't have a parking lot. There are 2 parking lots.
Yeah, but
Right, no, I'm just saying, there's a lot of things that.
the goal here is to try to break that barrier of
Yes.
boundaries and just try to get it all done as efficiently as we can.
Yep.
So in this spreadsheet, because I had it up, I'll just show you, there's a tab here that has, you know, our assumptions that we worked on for positions, salaries. Every line item is in here. Tom, I know you're gonna drool over this, but make sure I'll get you a copy.
We have a driller. Dan Hunter will be looking at.
It's a lot of data.
There's a lot of information in this, including assumptions about capital outlay, capital facilities, long-term forecasts. All of this is available to the public and has been, and it's, I think, where we want it to be, at least to start the presentation component to this. But I want to jump back to the presentation, get through that, try to get back through that. Okay. We talked about the staffing. The equipment information is the slide here, but it's also in detail in that spreadsheet. Do you want to touch on any of the equipment needs?
Then I didn't update on this table as it was in the PowerPoint, but that's 2 dual axles into the premium level, not the one. That number, what's that difference in that number?
That's what that dollar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think when we think about equipment it's not in here, but in the spreadsheet, there's a column that I had added. For what do our current contracts expect the contractor to have. I mean, we put in, both towns have in their contract the minimum amount of equipment that someone needs to show they have to do the job. And I said, okay, well, if we're gonna hold ourselves to that level of standard and build in those contingencies and the fail safes when something's down, we need to know that you've got a couple in reserve. And it was interesting to kind of see how far off are we in terms of what we're proposing having versus what we expect someone else to have. And so these numbers, you know, adding that second dual axle, you know, if one of those goes down, you can still send out, I mean, it's a smaller truck and you got smaller quantities in there of salt and sand, but you can still, just takes longer, but you can send another one of those trucks out on that route. But it's very possible you want two dual axles in your fleet at a minimum, for some of those longer loops. So this doesn't really account for a whole lot of fail safes, like not accounting for a grader under any scenario. And previously, Damariscotta's contract expected it, and I think yours still does, a grader. Whoever's responding to that contract. We're not expecting to buy a grader through any of these scenarios. So I think there's some differences in what our contracts currently expect and what we're proposing. These are pretty lean on the equipment size. When we get into the budget stuff, it is assuming kind of a staggered replacement, a combination of new and used. So you're not starting out brand new everything, so you have to replace them all in the same time frame later on. So it was an attempt to try and stagger that over that future, that 40-year future. The phase two I didn't build out what the phase two buy-in is there after at the 60th year, but presumably you choose and you fill in the gap between the standard or the premium, whatever service you're looking to perform at. That phase one, you could just kind of mirror those other numbers at that point. But you'd have a minimum amount of equipment to be able to do the plowing of the roads within the downtown footprint. Unless you still have that in expanding your roads contracts and through that contractor.
What's the big truck? I don't know these 750s. It's like, what's the big one that we see plowing?
The big one would be considered that dual axle. The 750, without everything loaded in it, I think you can still squeak by without a Class A license.
Yep.
You load it up and actually weigh, you're probably over. But a lot of towns are shifting out away from the dual axles just because of how challenging it is to get Class A drivers. Even if you're willing to pay them to go through it, you still got challenges at times to get people to want to do that work. And so a lot of them have been shifting down to the 550s and the 750s to be able to still get the work done.
So is this, all this equipment is net new equipment, or there's some of it we already have?
It'd be all new equipment. Damariscotta's got one 550.
Not all new to the town,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Not all,
exactly, yeah, you-
just want to clarify.
Yeah, no, I mentioned a mix of new and used right out of the gate, just so you can stagger those replacement cycles. With all of these, there's an assumed, within the 40-year projection, there's an assumed service life for all of these. And I'll say, for example, I think the pickup truck, I had assumed, I think, at 8 years. The 550, I believe we had at 10. The 750 and dual axles between 10 and 12 years. For those, the loaders at 10, backhoe would be at 10, excavator would be at 10. And then the sidewalk equipment is more of like a 5, depending on like our Wackernoose and front end loader, I'm expecting 10 out of that. But if you were to invest in the deeper breakdown there of equipment, like those small stand-on Boss machines that you'll see going through in Damariscotta, 5 years for those. So we put some thought into those replacement cycles. I think one of the columns shows that in the spreadsheets, if people look at that. To get a sense of, this isn't a professional space needs assessment. We did look at a couple towns have done, in between Kevin and I's experience and talking to others and seeing others, facilities out there, you know, kind of at a minimum what we think we would need to stand up facility wise. More conversation around the salt sand storage certainly could be had. But a garage at a minimum of 100 by 60, 6,000 square feet, given in the assumption that you're not trying to store every piece of truck and equipment in a heated space.
This blue.
Yeah, so that one, those yellow boxes are meant to, you know, signify trucks. So you can see at a 10 by 60, you can get 2 trucks there on the end. The rest of that building would be for shop space, office space, bathrooms, storage for the crew.
What's your acreage here?
That's a minimum. So the bigger box, there's a 2 acre plot. The gray area is pavement. The kind of beige, would be just gravel. And then the green spaces in there would be, just vegetation. In one corner of it, you'd have room for some bins and, material to be able to put on the roads, so your gravel, your coal patch, that kind of stuff. At the bottom there, that longer, bigger building at the bottom, is a 200 by 65 foot, storage for your sand and salt. That'd be kind of the primary storage. We're anticipating, you see there, a secondary one, a much smaller one, but one that could store a smaller amount, assuming you're not gonna be able to find a site, perfectly centrally located. And so, that, those type of structures, we've got some cost estimates from our perspective in there from what other towns have invested. But this just kind of give you a starting point of what we were looking at for a minimum for space needs. And what that would kind of map out. The larger area of beige in the bottom, I don't want folks to kind of lose sight and forget. 2 acres, I think we were proposing 5 at a minimum in a future site selection. That beige area there was just to kind of, it's not noted, but would be more for if you're doing ditching, tree cutting, you got to take all that somewhere. And sometimes you forget to count it down in your facility in acreage you're looking to invest in. So, in this 2 acre plot, there'd be some room for that, but that would fill up pretty quick managing 60 miles of road. And so that I think is something to be mindful of. That's not what we're proposing. The 5 acres is what we were suggesting be looked at if you were going to take that route to do this. 10 acres potentially, if in the future the 2 towns need to consider, say, a transfer station, you could put it on the same property. Employees would already be there, equipment would already be there. You just have the ability to, in the future, expand if you want. It's not to handcuff yourself and need to invest in another site. But at least from a facilities perspective, that's what we were thinking. Nothing crazy. I think when talking to one colleague, and they were suggesting like 10,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet. No, sorry, 10,000 square feet. I was like, that's big. And if we're talking 7 employees, up to 12 employees, I mean, do you always want more space? Yeah, but what we can accomplish was by storing it under a cover outside, where the vehicles are there was a pole barn, something that has power, something you get underneath, keep the sun from hitting it, as drying things out on that, plug in so that the block heaters can run if you need them to. You need a couple of bays to be able to bring equipment to work on it if you need to work on it, but you don't need to invest in that heated space for everything to be in. So we're trying to be minimal on that. It'll be a lot more conversation if this goes forward as to facilities truly, but just a starting point for people to think about it.
This is on the shoestring budget design.
Yep. And that salt shed, the footprint of the salt shed there is big. The 3,200 ton, just to give folks an idea. Between the 2 towns, that would give you 3,200 tons of storage space for material. The 2 towns purchased almost 2,300 tons of salt in FY25, and estimated to have used 3,000 yards of sand. And so that should have mentioned that as helpful reference point. Salt, it can haul it in. Sand is not easy to haul in January, February when everything's frozen. And so it's you're going to want to stack that up and mix it ahead of the winter as much as you can. The way both of us, neither town has a big salt storage capacity, and we've got pretty small quantity heads. So for Damariscotta, we can get about 3, maybe 4 trailer beds in there before it's full. Yours might be slightly bigger. The sidewalls on that really, on either building, really aren't built in a way that you can stack it really high. Fortunately, so and I mention that because this footprint here is huge. If you were to, this is a 6-foot wall, foundation wall. If you were to go to an 8-foot foundation wall, you could take that footprint, still at 65 foot wide, but shrink it down to almost 150 foot. Go to 10 feet, again, you could stack a little bit higher. So there's some ways there to, if we were to get in that without spending too much time now, to be able to shrink these footprint costs for space needs.
So in the budget, the cost for that is in the debt area?
Yeah, when we look at the budget, there's the operating, there's capital equipment and then capital facilities. So that would be in the facilities tab.
That slide.
Yeah. So starting with year 1's a little bit easier. For cost, trying to project out into the future to find out, as Tom was asking earlier, where's that break-even point? Is there a break-even point? There's a lot of assumptions baked in the 10-year outlook. We do capital planning, for what costs are gonna be. You can only imagine 40 years out, we're not gonna be able to nail this. But we do have and shared previously those 20 years of contract over cost history, some contracts, some in-house cost. And again, we were looking at 200 to 500% increase over a 20-year period. But divided that equally over that period, it's 22%. That's not what it's gonna be. So this graph here, the current budget projection line, that kind of light blue, that trends on the top. The forecast on that was assuming a 7.5% increase year over year. It's less than what we've been seeing. But that's at a 7.5% increase year over year under the current, that's not just the contract, that's the current budget that we shared earlier, the 1.8 today. 40 years is a long time. That number that you see there is really big. It's hard to imagine that that's what it will cost us, but if you were at 7.5%, that's what it goes to in 40 years. The personnel costs, when you look at any of these formulas, I assume the same increases for personnel costs, supply costs, the service costs, and then the properties and facilities and equipment costs on the operating side. Those are all the same assumptions year over year. And so I estimated 5% annually on personnel costs. It's wages, insurance, retirement, all of those personnel, direct personnel related costs, 5% annually. All your supply costs, estimating at 2.5%. Those don't generally jump as high or as quick. The service costs, things you have to contract out, what we've been seeing, because they're having all the same cost issues and challenges we are. So on the service costs that are in there, those do range between 2.5% and 5%, depending on which type they are. Trying to think, something like audit service is a little bit more stable versus plot contracts. So, and that's relevant in the phased approach. I'm assuming a 7.5% on the plowed contract portion that would still be in there for the roads piece on the phased. Properties, facilities, and equipment, the way it's mapped in there, we actually only have a year one cost for that to get furniture and some of those things that you need to put in the building that might not be included in the construction of the facility. But after that, the rest of those kind of supplies and things that support that are just in the operating budget. So there's like a zeroed out if you're looking at these numbers on the spreadsheets. That's the explanation of that. So you see going out 40 years, the trend with these assumptions, the current budget would at 40 years out would be pushing 25 million. And then the premium standard and phase level, the premium and the phased end up coming, I think, within $1 million of each other, or actually less than $1 million of each other by year 40. You can't really see it there, but the way it starts out, the premium level service is your highest one. Then the standard of the phase would be a little bit lower than that, as Kevin showed those numbers earlier. The standard level of service, the difference between those two, 40 years out, between that and then the premium and the phased, you're talking annually a difference of $7 million if you stuck with the standard and didn't change that level. So this doesn't account for a change in the community's desire for a level of service. If you stuck with standard, it was that the whole way through. I know for Damariscotta, contract expectations have changed over 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Things were added and realized, and so that's part of some of those increases that we were seeing. Is we demanded a little bit higher level of service throughout that term. But I'm not assuming that this does assume that we don't change, other than the phased approach. So just be mindful of that. There is the break even. It's again hard to see the exact years those happen. But seeing that there, that blue line crosses the phased and the premium service, by year 15, you've broken even on an annual basis. The cumulative savings, cumulative savings chart that we had in here, you're talking about the difference for any one of those three that we would do in house by 40 years out, $20 to $30 million. Hard to imagine.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna put that out there. It's hard to imagine. There's a lot of assumptions in here.
Thank you.
But the upfront is huge. The long term for these communities to consider something like this, as this is mapped out, has the potential to be huge savings 40 years from now. So then you get into what time frame are we trying to plan this for? Who is this investment for? do you believe the numbers? Encourage folks to get in these spreadsheets and take a look at them. If we've got something in there that's not right, certainly we want to know about it now. But there's a lot of detail in there for people to dive into and look at.
And this, currently the capital effort, the facility bill doesn't assume any federal grants to help pay for
There's a spreadsheet that would show what that difference would look like. I don't have it on here, graphed on here to see what that is, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly some attraction in grant funding to fund regional services to help, communities be more efficient and lower their costs. I just assume that we assume that we won't get that. So worst case scenario, financially, we know what we're getting into. Best case scenario, we can get a grant and lower that upfront cost, and you invest some of that for future maintenance, but you don't have to, invest the $300,000 to $400,000 right out of the gate annually on the debt payment.
Given, I'm sorry, one more question, just to clarify. The current budget screen, and then what year does, without any grant assistance, what year does standard service cross?
And you go to the budget forecast sheet there and go to the long-term forecast. I did highlight them on there. I didn't make the notes on here and I should have. So long-term forecast.
Sorry, I'm just not used to this. All right, long-term forecast?
Yeah, can you zoom out for a minute, just because go back in. So just, scroll to the right there. All right, so
That is.
this graph here shows you on an annual basis what our costs are going to be. I did have a graph. If you scroll down, I believe you'll see. Okay, so maybe you zoom in on this one, that second one there. This graph here, and I should have put it in and I didn't. Is what that cumulative. So we're, I'm less interested in some way in understanding like in what year is it less than the current projection, but cumulatively, will we have saved money and at what point? And that's where the graph crossed in different places. You can't see the year on that, but again, up in the spreadsheet there, I do have it highlighted in the years in which the cumulative savings hit. So in year 10, on the standard level of service being met, you've hit your savings at that point. The first 10 years, it's going to cost you potentially a little bit more in the first few, but it does level out with a 7.5% increase on the current budget track. Year 16 is when you'd see that cumulative savings on the phased approach, and year 18 is the projection for when you'd see that cumulative savings on the premium approach. And if you go all the way to the right at year 40, you can see what the projections would be for with these assumptions, but the projections are for the cumulative savings at year 40. 129, 168, $128 million savings cumulatively for that 40-year period.
So the details in the devil, so the baseline assumptions of 3.5%, or 5.5%, and 7.5%. How many years do they go back for both the town and for our contractors to get that running percentage? Because if we change that assumption, then everything changes.
Huge, yeah. So they have it here, Kevin, if you scroll down a little bit,
Stop sharing. On this one or not?
that's in the spreadsheet, yeah. Scroll down a little bit. So I had it here where if we want to change say we don't think the 7.5% is the winter contract year-over-year average. It gets a little complicated if you go into
I'm just saying,
links that
the
don't have a
last
typical.
5 years, is that what it's been for them? Because we both had the same inflation and other, cost issues.
Oh, it's been huge. We've been in the last 10 years, each town's seen 140 to 150% increase in the last 10 years. And if you divide that by 10, that's 15%, if it was equal every year.
But, okay, so the only other baseline we have is what Damariscotta has been doing, because we've had our own public works. That last 5 years has been running on 5.5% or something like that.
I have to go back and look. I put it in here looking forward at 5.5%.
Yeah, well, but that's what I'm
You
saying.
can get to go back and just pull it out here real time, but yeah.
So those two percentages are key to the whole thing.
And we were conservative on both of those numbers.
In this graph, can you change those and then changes the graph?
Yeah,
So
if you were to-
put it at 10, what does that look like? Just since we've been looking at over the last, we said 10 years.
Mhm.
just changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you go back up to that table, I mean, the chart changed and your scale changed from 25 million up to, what was it, 50, the top line, by going 10%.
Yeah.
Um. 60 up there, and so then as you change that, the lines up above would show, all those scenarios and how that
Sure.
cumulative savings may play out. In order to change, I feel I didn't think the difference between personnel costs and supplies were changing equally.
So you
I
said bring
did-
those up.
I did
Gave
separate those.
assumptions on like each of those.
I think probably 4 months ago when we had done this, or I put this in there, I did just assume 5.5 or 7% year over year for the premium and the standard, but it got real complicated if you're trying to account for vehicle replacements and.
Did you do a little modeling to say worst case scenario for our costs versus best case for them and see, how much change?
Mhm. We have just the year one captured, we can certainly model it out, but I mean. It'd be, I think it'd be better to try and get a sense of what forecasted model do we want to go for. If we want to pick 2 or 3, we can build it out, but we could build it for 10 or 12 without knowing where the guidance is from the boards.
Right, I don't wanna spend too much
Yeah.
staff time on any more of this until we know where the boards wanna go.
When you started out with your, objective to say, we want this to be
Yeah.
break even in the 5th year, the 10th year.
We didn't.
But more of a question, will it, can it? Yeah, I think when we started, it was, can we, we're paying 1.2 million for winter operations between the 2 towns. Initially, the question was more simply, can we do winter operations in-house? For the same or less without compromising quality? And the answer was yes, but then you have to realize there's also summer maintenance numbers that are in there too. So you'd have to build out that crew to be able to do that, build the equipment, buy the equipment, build the building, and so overall. Initially, you're not doing it for cheaper.
And has there been any, targeting or the location for the facility? No.
Not.
Nothing in
not
earnest.
In earnest, no.
I mean, we look at a map and say, oh, where would we like to go with our acreage?
He just sends me links to Zillow or sites that, I tell him why it won't work.
I don't know, tour, look at that design, because it doesn't have any flare.
Please don't.
We did it on the cheap, okay? So that is the crux of our presentation. The next piece of this, sort of talking about next steps, and really, it's a question of these boards. Should we enter into an interlocal agreement? Do we want to move forward with this in any capacity? And then, if so, we need to figure out that funding formula. How do we make sure that we can do this and it's fair and equitable for both communities? And doesn't completely break the bank. And then, what if both of those things, first thing, yes, we want to, we come up with a funding formula. When do we want to actually take this to the voters? How soon would we want to do that? So that's sort of what we hope to have a conversation about tonight. And then there's follow-ups to that. So really, I guess the question is, how do we feel about this?
Well, I'm a little overwhelmed. I haven't been to a lot of these detailed meetings, but, it's certainly a lot to look at now that we have this detail, but we're not ready to make any kind of.
That's speaking for the committee. The committee felt at this point there was enough here to get it in front of both boards, assuming that both boards would have more questions and then whatnot. So I thought there was a good point where, like, there's enough information here that we can get it out in front of
Are
everybody.
you looking for board approval tonight?
No,
No. Okay.
no, just gut reactions and
Yeah.
where do you want us to go next? Or do you want the committee to keep, I'm not sure what the committee can do more for the boards. Other than all of the board members taking time to go through the details.
Well, I think the objectives are, generally the same when we started. So how can we collectively save money, get the job done? And that's a worthwhile objective, and it comes down to, can we afford it? How long is it gonna take? And whether the towns or the public will approve it, because it's gonna be the hit at the beginning. But if they can see, the horizon, and it's not too far out, you know, they have a shot at it, but. I don't know, I think, can't speak for him, but we both feel, I think we need to spend more time getting into the numbers.
There's not only the cost savings aspect, there's also the increase in flexibility and, you know, summertime maintenance and whatnot. So there's a perceived increase in performance for the dollar. Maybe not immediately for the winter operations, but certainly over time. And, you know, having sort of a dedicated crew to tackle summer maintenance could be a plus that isn't quite.
It's a hard one to quantify.
It's a hard one to quantify.
Yeah,
that's
talking about that, and it's like, there's a perceived benefit there, but, or value added, but you don't really know how to quantify that. You can say they're gonna get X more things done.
Yeah.
But perceive that it'd be there.
Even
but
some of the things
why
that
not?
have been sitting on our list of things we need to do on facilities maintenance that we've not been able to do.
Yeah, I'm saying, yeah, long list, it doesn't stop.
It's a long list, yeah, and
Talk,
it's getting longer.
Yeah,
I painted the town office last year.
I found you did.
and you knocked in your public works department over here.
I do take the track.
I mean, my gut feeling is that it's a lot to digest and commit. You know, discuss and then commit to this year's warrant. Which in our case has gotta be done in 4 weeks.
Yep.
So, that's
Less than.
less than that, you're right. But,
Warrant has to be done by the 13th of April.
yeah.
It's rushed. Well, we wanted to get it out there, but so that you have time to think about it, if you wanted to do. Understood.
Yeah, if not for the June, I mean, there'll certainly be a big turnout in November if it was a ballot driven question, this year. That would certainly give a little more time. I mean, there was still time, what we were proposing, if the boards were comfortable with a June meeting article, just to agree to an interlocal agreement. There'd be bigger in April and May, and potentially even another June public meeting, just to get the information out there. But it is admittedly, you know, it is proceed, it could be a quick turnaround time for folks to wrap their minds around it if they haven't been following it. November would give you a little more time. I think for Kevin and I's sake, we just want to get some clarity on eventually quickly where the boards are. You know, as it does consume.
Yeah, I think the interlocal agreement's
Time.
gonna, the cart before the horse. I think they're getting a little more feeling of positivity from the 2 boards. To say this is looking like really good to go for it, then you go into the interlocal, but to do the interlocal first.
What's the expenditure liability if, let's say you didn't put this on a warrant, what's,
What does that cost?
it gets serious or there's, yeah, when we start to acquire assets, right?
Yeah, it's
So,
after.
How much are we talking the first sort of?
Well, the thought was
The
if,
due diligence.
if you do, the due diligence piece would be first, do the communities want to do this? First, do the boards want to do this? Do the communities want to do that? Do this? And then it's, okay, well, yes, you do. We now need to go find a site. And so that is a piece of, can we go, do we have permission? Do boards have permission to put down some earnest money on a site? So you might spend, you know, some of your facilities reserve on due diligence work and be able to go under contract on the site to do that work. So then you can come back to the community and say, we have identified this site, we've done the due diligence, we've done the initial costs estimate for how much it's gonna be to build this building. Can we go borrow for this fund? Based on the cost share formula, you've already created the interlocal agreement. Now, that's almost like a second chance for the community to say, no, we don't do this. And then if that fails, obviously the interlocal agreement can be withdrawn and the only expense you've had is maybe 50,000 by each community at most.
Maybe. Depends how far you get into the site suitability work and feasibility work. I mean, what the price of the purchase option would be, but I think. We're doing some housing stuff right now, and I think we're looking at the fire stations, and you're trying to get to 30%. We have to figure out how far down into the design work we want to get.
Only need to go
I don't think you need 30%, you just need probably that first 3 phases that we're doing right now with the housing work, probably in the ballpark of 70 grand plus the purchase option for the whole cost, and then divide that by 2, so. 50 to 100 grand maybe,
Okay.
for each town.
I just don't, I mean, the 13th is our next select board meeting. I just don't see us having the time to discuss it. And ask questions, ask for follow-up data. You know, I think it's a couple of meetings to, select board level.
Sure.
To discuss this, but we have to commit our warrant at our next meeting.
Yeah, it's probably November is
Yeah.
I mean,
Ideal time frame.
we've spent a lot of time doing this. It doesn't make sense to rush now. You know, let's let everybody sit with the numbers and look at everything and understand it and ask the questions and get the answers. Before you're asked to actually make a decision on it. It's,
I don't feel anybody's gonna benefit if we push this too.
no, exactly. There's no benefit. We've got potentially, 5 years before we really want to step into any of the roles anyhow. 3 to 5 years. I guess we're down to 2 to 4 years. But
You're talking about other contracts?
but yeah, just, in terms of how our contracts are right now, that would be best case scenario, I guess, would be 4 years from now, we take on some of it. So it doesn't make sense to rush the first decision. Because I think when people get rushed, they get defensive and maybe are less likely to, be interested. So I think.
Just thinking about having a joint public works department. It's like a library. It's a whole lot cheaper for us to have Skedonka than individual towns have their own library. It's cheaper for us to have CLC ambulance than each town has its own ambulance service. It intuitively makes sense.
Yeah.
And the numbers seem to bear it out.
Well,
In the long term.
Yeah.
Whether we get there in year, whatever, 10 or 12 or 15.
yeah, it takes the profit motor out. Yeah, you can't tell me that Hager's running a 503 C over there. You can't tell me that there's no profit in
Right,
our,
built in.
Yeah,
in
that's the
the
difference.
snowplow contracts, and that's what this does, is it takes that profit motive out of it.
Yep.
That's the,
I mean, 10 years is not a bad ROI, if you ask me.
I'm sorry, what's that?
10 years is it's not a bad ROI,
No,
if you ask me, for anything,
no,
that's got serious capital assets involved. Yes.
It's a big ask, it's a big scare you're looking at, it's not a 5-year investment, it's a, to make it work, it's been 25, 30 years, I get it, it's a big ask. It's scary to think
It's a
that.
big change. It's a change.
It's the out of the gate, it's the fear factor for all communities.
It is absolutely.
To me, I mean, you have the retirement community, you have the young community.
Yeah.
Everybody's struggling with taxes. And I echo Tom and, if we can see a payout, that's the discussion. And when, it's the out of the gate that's gonna hurt it, or it's gonna be hard to swallow. That was a lot
There's
of.
one form, they were Damariscotta.
Was, so it's been a lot, just we highlight the dates and places to those agendas, but this has been a culmination of nearly a year of this working group. So I really do appreciate members of the working group and members of the public who have attended those meetings on a regular basis.
Hey, the first thing I want to talk about, select board meeting is that scary $640,000 number.
Yeah, I mean, if it is a goal, I mean, once we say, yes, 10-year ROI. Is worth it as communities, let's do it. Then it's a question of, okay, how do we fund it? How do we share that cost? So I think those are the 2 questions that really go back to each select board. I don't know if we do. Obviously, there's time is needed for everybody to go look at the details and ask questions of us. I don't know if it's scheduling sometime during each board's meetings, if Andy and I attend both, just to make sure that these conversations are had. The interlocal agreement I drafted boards, the committees looked at multiple times. I gave it to our town attorney 2 weeks ago. I still don't have information back, so I'm waiting on that about his thoughts, but I thought it was important that the board see it, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got two members on here. too.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. I don't think we're negative at all. I mean, you guys done an awful lot of work and, it's just that it's a little hard to take it all in. And I think from a public standpoint, some of the presentation materials might have to be changed to digestible by the general public. But it's a good framework to work on.
Yeah, we thought our audience was the board, so that's where we tried to focus it. But,
Right.
yeah, if the decision is to move forward, we will work to create the visuals and understanding of what this is to the public too. Because the scary thing is the information that's gonna go out there is, it's gonna cost us more to start this program. The answer is, yes, it is. We have to build a facility.
Right.
That's a big piece of this. We have to buy all this equipment to get started. All these other towns that did this 20 years ago are in a better position to have a public works department.
Yeah.
We're asking to do it today.
100%.
With today's numbers, it's hard.
Well, they were all in the same position at one point, if it was 20 years ago, then,
Right.
yeah.
Have to build it out, yeah.
So that'll be the concern, and how do you help people understand this and get there? Those are the conversations that are gonna have to be had. It's probably best that it takes 6 months to have those conversations than us slam it in 3 months.
Yeah.
Right.
I offer an opportunity, I saw a couple of hands up out there, as the board.
I know Larry
entertained.
wants to say something. Does everybody have a question or?
I got a statement question. I've attended all but one of these meetings, very first one I missed. Right from the get-go, this has appeared to me to be a sales job to the select board. The big word is assumption. There's an awful lot of assumption going in here. We're spending millions of dollars or trying to spend millions of dollars. There really hasn't been a lot of, we've had very qualified people in the audience offering input to the committee. It's been basically disregarded. Input from guys that have had decades of experience, myself being one of them, and two other men that have been in the road construction business, which is disappointing for the select board to not know that that was the case. The proven long-term cost that you people are talking about, anybody can play with numbers and make them look like anything. I think, again, there's an awful lot of assumption of what these costs are gonna be that aren't reality. $58,000 is not a real number for a guy with a class 2 or class 1 license. Plus you gotta put another, in Damariscotta, another $30,000 in insurance on top of that. So the real cost becomes close to $100,000 per man. You can, I'm not gonna down the consultant, but he was from Massachusetts, he worked for the state highway department. You had two guys in the room over and over again that had that same experience that I talked about, and you didn't use it. The department growth it's gonna grow. It's not gonna be 2 men or 5 men or 6 men. Every department in both towns, it's static, grows. That's just the way life goes, which will bring cost, added cost. The main DOT right now can't find the type of people that you're trying to put in this position in DOT. That's why they're subbing to work out for Route 27 and Route 1 and all that. So I don't know, as one who had 30 years experience dealing with truck drivers, and I own 55 trucks over that 30 years. Getting a truck driver to do other work besides driving trucks is gonna be very, very difficult. And I don't care what they say in Mapleton, Maine. That's a whole different can of worms compared to down here on the coast. Mapleton, for you people that don't know, was one of the towns that we consulted with, or the committee consulted with. And the two biggest things to me is what's the rush to sign a 25-year commitment? I won't be around in 25 years to pay for this, so I see the savings, but hopefully my children and grandchildren. But what is the big rush that we gotta get this done this spring? We talked, people in the community, people in this room that was there said, let's start small. Let's start with 1 truck or 1 loader. Damariscotta already has 2 men. Find people competent to run that and build your public works. If you're gonna go a public works route, build it small over a period of 15 years with 5-year plans, 10-year plans, and a 15-year plan. I seriously doubt you're gonna save $25 million over the next 50 years. I just can't buy that. Because you haven't saved it over the last 25 years.
Well, I think we just said we're not gonna rush this, so we got party,
People to hear.
pressing party.
You know, and on top of that, Damariscotta just bought a $2 million fire truck. And this building we're sitting in is looking at some real significant numbers for repairs in the very near future. And that's gonna be released in a couple of weeks. So that's a tax commitment to Damariscotta residents, right? And Newcastle's part of that because they're part of the school systems.
That was my statement, is when we talk about the impact to the taxpayer, it's not just the public works department, it's all those other services like the school, the fire department, all of those departments are gonna have higher expenses over those time frame, those years as well. So it's also going to be raising, you know, the tax commitment from the tax base. So it's not just the public, it's an overall amount that we're going to pay.
And I might add, we was asked if we would sit on any committee for purchasing trucks or anything like that. And I know 2 out of 3, I can't speak with Justin, but I know Seth and I both said we'd be more than willing to consult. And we've never asked.
Which would make it more accurate numbers.
When you look around this room, the age, no offense, of people in this room, you don't see any 20, 30-year-old people. Just big, they're right handy, sure. They can't afford to live in Damariscotta. They're gonna be priced out of Newcastle. Taxes are too high. And we're adding to my lot of the fire department building, the policeman, obviously, are adding up to make Damariscotta local expensive town. We need to think about that before they drive the young people right out of G now.
Any other folks, questions, thoughts, comments before we wrap up?
Well, I'll just point out. Literally, we're not very young, but anyway, catch it up. And yeah, I see the graphs and the numbers and all that stuff, and I've done a lot of business plans in my career. And right now, it's all, you know, in my opinion, I look at all the fine detail stuff, but I would project a break even maybe 20-25 years. By the time you start replacing equipment that only lasts 5 years, you replace it 5 times before you hit the 25-year mark. So I'm not sure if those numbers are in there that way. And I've got business plans to make them look good for the bank, and then that went to reality. I always had 2 cups, but you know, and I think you need to be honest about that when you put it out. It's not a break even in 5, 10, or 15. This is a 20-25 year potentially break even.
We appreciate you looking at the numbers and seeing that, and helping us understand where you believe it would fall.
I will say to the point about the replacement of equipment, that's all factored in there, and it's actually factored in a way that you pay off the initial investment, whether it's new or used, over either a 3 or a 5-year period. If you got a 10-year piece of equipment, you're paying off the initial investment in 5 years, you're actually prepaying for the year 10 replacement over the next 5 years in trying to minimize the town's liability and risk for interest payments on future debt. And so it after the first 2, you're kind of caught up at that point where you're able to pre-fund on a 8-year or a 10-year versus trying to fund it all in 5. But it does account for that. It's an important, I think, distinction in that is that we're trying to avoid the future interest payments to the community. The fire truck replacement, you know, we have to assume it's possible we have interest payments on that. That's a big number. We're working hard to lower it, but that's all.
That's a good point, though, that this gentleman probably wasn't aware that that was factored in, but I think laying out all the key assumptions behind the plan, like that one, every one of them, would be really helpful as a starter for digestion. Here are all the baseline assumptions that we've made, right? Then people can look at them from their own perspective to see if they have something to bear on it, whether they think it's feasible or not. And then maybe even a worst case, best case on each of those running scenarios.
Great. Anything else from the board? Did you guys ever take it back?
I don't know, just looking forward to some input from some members here, so I think, yeah, there's a lot to take in.
That's a lot of
It's
information.
a lot to take in. Yeah, we've had the benefit of having.
We've been at this for a year.
So, handful of meetings and the Google Sheets, so
Fair to assume,
there's a lot there to dig into, yeah.
fair to ask or assume if by the end of April, I don't know if the boards would feel that's a reasonable time to digest some of this, come back with more questions. Just so that the committee, if they need to do more work and what specifically, that seemed like a good benchmark to aim for by the end of April,
Yeah,
be able to have.
Generally, the goal would be to go into next year's budget with a decision to go forward or not. So.
Not the one we're working on right now, the next,
Next year.
November, and ideally November would be interlocal agreement question, and then as part of the budget process.
Right, that would allow us to start with the budget.
I think Andy, that's fair. We have 2 meetings by the end of April. So, I think, like I said, I think we have a new business item, a new business item, and we can give you some feedback. That's fair. Couple meetings.
Yeah, we're open to continuing to work, obviously work numbers and changes to the interlocal. I mean, it's all draft, it's all still obviously to be worked before there's any sort of, decision on the public process thereafter.
Yeah.
I mean, we need it, we need the input. The committee's gotten to a point, Kevin and I got to a point where it's like, we need more input. Those documents are all available for people to see, and anyone that's inclined to look at spreadsheets and 40-year projections, please look at it. When we have reached out and engaged a few folks in the community, to look at it, and, some have been able to look at numbers, some haven't gotten back to us. But it doesn't take a direct request either. So again, all that stuff's available to folks and would welcome the feedback.
Yeah.
Well, it's no saying when you assume something. You know what that all means.
but it would be super helpful if you do have concerns over certain numbers to actually give us specifics.
We have,
On what's.
we've tried, Karen.
Okay.
John Clark, Cowshed Corner, Golden Corner. That's the big concern then for the folks at Newcastle is the mill rate between the 2 towns. They're not even close. What is Damariscotta? It's 21, Newcastle is 14. Yeah, Damariscotta is going up. What's this do to Newcastle's mill rate? I asked that question. You have to write them all down. When we ever, ever come back.
Mill rates.
How that's gonna impact Newcastle mill rate. It's not a good thing for Newcastle. There's no way you can cut it and frame it, they'll sell it to anybody that's paying their taxes in time
And paid attention.
and paying attention.
I can do that.
Alrighty.
Big question. From input from the press. So I want to ask the folks real quick as we're getting input and what do we do to save costs? This effort, the end result is to look at cost savings long term. So if we don't look into this stuff, what is the answer from the folks in the audience? What do you want your boards to do to look at different cost savings? I have a fear, I'll tell you personally, whether this plan works or not. I think that most communities are gonna be forced into positions where they're gonna have to do joint facilities, whether we want to or not. I think in the near future, from looking out at the contracted services, when we have one bid coming back, maybe on different things, at some point, I fear that we're gonna be, not just Damariscotta, Newcastle, but lots of communities are gonna be forced in a position where, we need to do this now. And that's a long difference, not just with looking at with fire departments and lots of different things, police departments all on the board. So I guess the input from a Damariscotta board member was, where does the community want us to look into long-term cost savings, you know, how do we do that? So I appreciate some input, some constructive input on where we do that. You know, when you talk about mill rates, I mean, the reality is, you know, your simple cost of living is always going up. We talk about growth of departments and with growing towns. Your departments do grow. I mean, it's natural. I don't know how you have a town that's not gonna grow a little bit, anyway, speaking as Damariscotta board member, I appreciate some input on that. Is like, where do you want our focus to be? So, Matt, you can input anytime. We all
Here's some
email.
input for you, Daryl.
What's that?
Here's some input. Now you have two contractors that plow snow. You got McClinic and you got Hayes.
Mhm.
Okay, in Bristol, their snowplow contract went down last year with bid
Okay.
because they had more people bidding on it. You've got snowplowing so expensive that you're gonna have contractors. Our snowplowing contract right now in Damariscotta is $150,000 more than it was 2 years ago. That's gonna bring more people to the table because they know they can make money in it. So your bid process may drive it down. I'm not saying it will, but it just did on your lawnmower contract. When you put it back up to bid a second time.
It's
because your first bid
right.
wasn't- I'm not saying that's the end
No,
all,
I get it.
but it's a possibility.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. Maybe work with a contractor about doing some stuff on your own downtown with your manpower that you got now with equipment. There are ways, maybe different than spending $25 million the next 4 years on whatever it's gonna be.
But with the cost of everything going up, it always does, nothing's going down. We all live that every day. If everything's going up in cost, to not raise taxes means we gotta start cutting services. So what do you wanna cut?
You have a premium service in Newcastle right now. I'm not so sure.
Which service?
What's that?
Which service?
Snow pumps.
Okay,
I'm not sure Damariscotta does, but we're paying for a premium service. That's only my opinion. I don't know how you bring it down drastically, but I think that there's ways working with a contractor that you might at least level off.
but that's just one thing, that's just one part of our town budget though.
I understand. But it's the biggest part.
It's
It's
a
for
big
your
part.
road maintenance.
It's a big part. But if everything's going up, the only way to keep things level is unless we can
Newcastle took
renegotiate
very
something like that.
aggressive stance on their road construction
Right.
a number of years ago, and you've done very, very well.
Yep.
Damariscotta unfortunately didn't, and we're paying the price for it.
So that kind of suggests that the taxes have to go up to pay for things that,
The other way is still cheap.
if you delay maintenance, then it bites you in the butt
Need to put more capital.
down the road, yeah.
Yeah. Invest
I mean,
more
these-
capital.
We all pay taxes, we don't wanna pay more taxes either, we're trying to figure out the best way to keep it.
All I'm saying is we offered really good sound advice and it wasn't listened to. It was arguments, and so we just backed off.
Recall that.
Now, we've incorporated some of the points that were brought up throughout the process in terms of that number's not realistic. We went back and looked at it, we changed some. So to say as a blanket statement, we didn't listen, that's not happening.
That's a false statement, Larry. No. You can sit there and say that all day long, but that's not
I'm
true.
not sure it's false, I'm just assuming.
Yeah, it is.
We have incorporated comments before. John, I did not get that number to you. I apologize. The mill rate impact of $600,000. I'll just use that number because that's the high end of this for Newcastle. That would be $1.30 more on the mill rate. That's what $600,000 would do. So that's why the formula conversation has to happen, and that understanding how the impact is for the taxpayer would be part of the public presentation pieces to this. But right now, I'm just trying to find out if the select board even wants to move forward. But Daryl's right, unless we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, is this a good thing for our communities? Because we are trying to focus in on providing good service at a reasonable cost. And we know just by looking at the history, doing it in-house over time is less expensive than doing it all by contract. Regardless of the gap between.
There's no profit. There's
I
no
was just
profit
gonna say,
margin.
we have to pay their profit
There's
margin.
no profit margin.
Right.
Nobody does it for free.
One potential benefit of this process is that we don't decide to go forward. It doesn't mean we don't decide to go forward at some time in the future, because we have a roadmap that we could apply potentially, you never know the future, things could actually improve. They've been getting worse lately, but they could get better. If they get better and, inflation goes down and, we bring in some more taxpayers or we get some of the nonprofits to chip in, the budget might improve and then you might be able to take it on in the future. But once, if you could get this thing sort of perfected so everybody's comfortable with all the assumptions and understands the assumptions and says all those are reasonable, you can revisit those same assumptions a year later, 2 years, and see if something changed. You got a model, you got a program that's already invested in all that work and all the line items and all the estimates. You can use it in the future, so it's not for naught, even if you decide not to go forward in November.
Kevin, I have a question for you. And-
But Larry, hold on a second.
What's that?
Rachel,
I'm sorry.
1 minute.
Because I was just to mention, the process is not at all objective, it seems. Especially with the public comment part, we keep hearing, oh, yes, we want public input, it hasn't felt that way, I assure. It's been shut down pretty much, and it's very concerning, and it just, whether it be numbers or otherwise, it is not felt as remotely objective in terms of the numbers and the information presented. And that is a real concern for taxpayers.
Kevin, it was stated that the state has an average of 10 miles per truck of plowing ability per stone. In your equation, you came up with 15 miles. And Seth said the same thing. He figures 10 miles per truck per stone. How do you figure you can do it with no experience? 50% more efficient.
It was, our initial conversation was 15, that was with 6 people. We've gone to 7.5 people under the service space. So we've 7.5 people for 60 something miles, that brings it closer. It is doable. The consultant we worked with and several of the other public works directors I've talked to said 10 is sort of the benchmark, but 15 is doable.
I'm not saying you won't have some stones will, but sometimes. And if the state average is 10, I don't see how you can come up with 50%. 50% is a big number, 50%.
Just said it, other towns are doing it, just talk to people.
If they have, why is the state average 10?
Any other parting?
I will say, I was on the board in Newcastle when we first attempted this when. I know there was some board members on both sides that were very much against it, so when some of us fell away, it got smushed and crushed. I'm not sure what killed it, doesn't matter. But I think it is the future. We thought of that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we had 20, I don't know how long it's been, almost 20 years ago. When we first run into this, so I like this better as far as a little more thought into the agreement piece and all that. We try to start out small for the reason of the investment. So I think a phase in will be much better than all in. And I definitely support that, get behind that. So I just wanna throw that out there.
Thank you.
Well, if we kept going, we'd be seeing those savings already.
Yeah, if they'd done it right the first time. Yeah, it wasn't a one-page agreement.
Does the board have anything else? Should we, adjourn? Mutually adjourn?
Yeah, make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
That is, those in favor.
Without objection.
Oh, hand up.
Yeah.
We haven't, thank you.
John, thank you for coming.
Well, we just had a voting.